Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was June 5th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is from another commune register of Joan's, and I don't know why they had 3 commune registers running at once. So, there's 3 different ones called commune that you can choose from, and there's nothing in the dating clause, the seal. There's nothing about the seal or anything that seems to distinguish these different commune registers from each other. And I wonder if it has more to do with the way that the labor was organized in the chancery than any kind of systematic decision about these documents should go in this one and these documents should go in that one. So before I go deeper into today's document from Commune Register 1826, I just want to talk about the state of play regarding access to Pares. So Pares is the gigantic database of digitized documents that is run by Spain's Ministry of Culture and Sport. I have been using documents from Pares for almost every episode. Occasionally I'll have a document from someplace else, like the Fondo Histórico de Aragon, but even that, I think, is drawing from the work that Pares has done. And that database has scanned documents from not just the archive of the Crown of Aragon, but archives from all over Spain and all kinds of different time periods, including up through the 20th century, I think. So there are, at this point, I think, more than a couple million scanned documents available on Pares. Now, there's been times in the last couple years when Pares has been very slow or it's just gone down. And so there's some kind of rumor mill going around, and my access to the rumor mill is through the comments on the Facebook page for Pares. I think it was late in 2025 or maybe early this year in 2026 that Pares was down for a little while, and there were a lot of people that were posting onto its Facebook page, "Oh my gosh, I'm using Pares for my dissertation or my research and it's down and I'm panicking." And so, yeah, there's people from all over the world that use Pares in order to do this really interesting archival work, like the kind of stuff I'm doing. And so this recent outage of Pares got me wondering, okay, what's going on? Because I didn't really need to access Pares for most of the episodes in May. I didn't really notice it was happening. And the reason I didn't need to access Pares is maybe part of why what's happening with Pares is happening. I'm not going to say that I caused the United States to be cut off from Pares, but basically I have a feeling like maybe people like me were kind of acting together and this was happening. So, okay, back in, I think it was February, I had Claude help me come up with a Python script in order to do some mass downloading from Pares. And so I've got about 10,000 images on my computer from Pares, and I can then just very quickly, without having to go to their website, I can look up the different images of the documents that I'm working with. And at the time, I chose about 25 registers to do a bulk download. And register 1826, the one that I'm working with today, was not among those. And so I went to go to register 1826. Oh, how did I decide that I wanted that register? It's from Daniel Girona y Llagostera. He put together that itinerary in which he identified a document for every day of Joan's reign and placed him in a location using the dating clause in the document, and then listed the register and folio for each day. And he was only missing May 5th and September 22nd. So I knew that I would have at least one document for each day, and then for some reason, the usual registers that I use are very sparse for both Joan and Violante in this kind of 2-week period, the beginning of June. And so I went to Daniel Girona y Llagostera to find a document for June 5th. It was in Register 1826, not one that I had chosen. Why? Because the Commune registers tend to have documents that are not as personal, and maybe they don't even have the monarch involved in the composition or even the authorship of the document. And gosh, using the word authorship, I'm kind of second guessing myself. We're going to leave that aside. I've already talked about that this week. So can go listen to, I think, the episode 2 episodes ago where I was going on about that issue. So anyway, I went to Pares and it is not working. So when you go to the Pares homepage, that loads, but then when you try to do a search to get to the register, to get to the scanned documents, it just keeps loading forever and it doesn't work. So then I went to the Facebook page for Pares, and I saw that there was one person who had said that he had emailed Pares about the problem, and that we should all just be patient. Then there was another person who put on the Facebook page that Pares had cut off North America from access. And at first I was like, oh, I don't really believe that, because the post was actually a little bit crass. They used a name. They called the Pares people by a name, and I'm not going to repeat it. And so anyway, I was doubting whether that was true. So I decided to do a little test. I used a new feature on Firefox, the browser Firefox, to easily go through a VPN, virtual private network, and I chose a country in Europe from the options. There's only like 5 options that you can choose from. Germany was one and France was another. And so I chose France. And lo and behold, when I went through the French VPN, I was able to access the database for Pares and the digitized images, just like I used to from within the United States. So it's true that Pares has made a decision to block access for the United States for those who are using an IP address in the United States. Pares is not accessible as of, I just tested it out again today. I'm recording this on June 1st. Yeah, I'm a little bit ahead with recording because I'm doing a workshop out of town coming up. So anyway, as of June 1st, yeah, Pares, you can't get to it. through an IP address in the United States. You got to use a VPN. So why is that happening? I don't know. I have a suspicion that maybe they detected too many bots or too many kind of AI scraping access attempts, and maybe my Python scripts were kind of part of that, or part of the thing that kind of raised a red flag about users from North America. And so if that's the case, I apologize. It's so convenient to have all those images just really easily accessible. You don't have to wait for the page to load or the images to load on Pares. It saved me a lot of just kind of downtime. So nice to have those images, but I acknowledge that I might have been part of the problem. Oh, so anyway, that's the state of play for access to Pares at this time, and maybe I'll find out a little bit more information about why they made that decision to block access for users inside the United States. Oof. All right, let's talk about today's document. Today's document is really long, so it starts out on folio 150V of Register 1826, and it goes for the full page and then goes on to the entirety of folio 151R, and then it has just a couple lines and the probata on folio 151V. The addressee is for all of the magistrates and town leaders of lots of places around Morella. So another Morella document. Now, the document from just a couple days ago was about some murder that happened in Morella, but this seems to be totally different. It seems to be completely unrelated. I was looking for a while to try to find some way to connect this document to the one from the other day, but I don't think there is any connection. This is, well, I don't know, other than just general violence that's happening. It turns out, and I didn't know this when I was recording the episode about Morella the other day, that this place is in tumult. There's a lot of violence going on. There's a lot of disagreement about who should be in charge of this particular region. Morella is kind of like a capital city of a region called Els Ports, and there's been a lot of disagreement and disputing and fighting over who is going to be the jurisdictional authority. My general sense, and I'm not quite sure about this, is that Morella wants to be independent and other entities don't want it to be. It's really confusing. There's a couple scholars, if you're interested in this particular region within the Crown of Aragon and what all of the political machinations were. You can read their articles, and I'll put them in the bibliography on the webpage for today's episode. One is named Jose Sanchez Adel, and the other one, more recently, in the last decade, is Vicente Royo Perez. And so you can look at their articles for a real breakdown of what was going on with Morella at this time. There is an interesting moment, and look, it's coming up in the Comune Register where I just didn't think it would happen all that much. There's a really interesting moment for my research purposes in this document. So about halfway down the page on folio 150V, we've got this whole line which is Violant's title, and this is Joan's register. And then in the middle we've got this Illustres Iolants Regina Aragonis Consoris Nostra Carissima. So, that's the Latin for Molt Cara Compagnona. So what's Violant doing in this big document? Well, Sibylla de Fortia is also mentioned even earlier. And it's all about how this particular region seemed to be in the Queen's portfolio. That all of the disputes, they were supposed to be settled by the queen. And so that's why Sibylla was involved earlier and why Violante was more recently involved, because all this kind of argument and back and forth and fighting, it seems like there's actually been some battles that have been happening, because there's a mention of destruction and ruin later on folio 150V. It seems like all of this, there's been an attempt to find a resolution, and the queens have made the attempt and it has not worked. And so part of this document is that Joan's court is saying, this has escalated and you have not listened to what Queen Violante told you to do, and you continue to fight, and now you're in bigger trouble because now this is going to be handled by the king. And so this at first doesn't seem like co-rule. It seems instead like when Violante, who has this lesser authority, is being ignored, then the king will step in and with his authority will solve the problem. In the article by Jose Sanchez Adel, I found out that this dispute was it was one of the major aspects of the Cortes de Monzon. So the Cortes is when leaders from around the realm, like all of the mayors and governors and such, they get together, and it's sort of like an estates general, and they meet up with the king, the royal officials, and they hash out and make kind of a big agreement, and it's supposed to hold, and it's supposed to be a venue to sort out some thorny issues. And one of those thorny issues at the Monzon Cortes was this one that's being discussed in this document here, the issue of the governance of Morella. Now, Jose Sanchez Adel says that the resolution to the tumult and the disputes that was causing all the destruction and instability, it was achieved at the Cortes de Monzon. Here's an interesting thing. The Cortes de Monzon, I think, goes into 1389. It starts in 1388. And this is something that I know from reading Thomas Bison's book in English, A Short History of the Crown of Aragon. The resolution for the Cortes de Monzon, the final document and the final negotiations that led to that document, it wasn't actually handled by Joan. He got frustrated. So he's there at the Cortes. He grows more and more impatient with the nobles and the town leaders, and he just gives up. He's like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go off and just go hunting in the mountains. That's what Sarita says. And it's Violante who comes in and handles the final negotiations and is able to bring the Cortes to a close, to kind of finalize the deal making. It's Violante who does that, not Joan. So in the end, we're kind of coming full circle with this issue, where in 1387, in June, Joan is basically saying, I'm going to take this over, or I guess you could maybe more accurately say his officials are, because I'm not quite sure how much involvement Joan has in this. There is not a signal in the probata that Joan is closely involved. It seems like just another one of the court documents. So in 1387, anyway, at Joan's group, or his court, they're saying, we're now going to take this over because you ignored Queen Violante. But then a couple years later, because it's still not resolved, I don't know if they're flat out ignoring Joan, but it's still not resolved. This whole issue of the governance of Morella, it does get resolved in the end at the Cortes de Monzon, but it's not Joan that's doing that. It's in his name, but it's not Joan that's actually doing it. It is Violante. So I think that in terms of co-rule in the moment, we don't really have a strong example with this document. But if you kind of zoom out and look at what happened with this over the longer course from, I don't know, whenever Violante issued her directive earlier this year, it was in one of the Commune registers, I'm sure, that once these become full text searchable, someone's going to be able to find that without too much trouble. But anyway, from early 1387 to 1389, we can see how this particular issue bounced between them, between Joan and Violante. So this very well could be something someone could hold up and say, look, over a 2-year period, we've got like another type of co-rule happening. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt cara compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.